The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness like a giant metal city. Ships from across the galaxy came and went from its docking bays. Inside the station's great halls, beings from hundreds of different worlds walked together under bright lights that never dimmed. Marcus Chen adjusted his formal Earth diplomatic uniform as he walked through the corridors. His 12-year-old daughter Sarah skipped beside him, her eyes wide with wonder at all the strange aliens around them. She had begged to come on this trip, and Marcus couldn't say no. This was humanity's most important moment in 50 years of space travel. "Dad, look at that one," Sarah whispered, pointing at a tall blue alien with 4 arms. "And that one has tentacles instead of legs." Marcus smiled despite his nervousness. "Remember what we talked about, Sarah? Be polite. Don't stare too much." They were heading to the Imperial Council chamber where Earth would ask to become a full member of the Galactic Empire. Until now, humans were only a probationary species, allowed to exist but not trusted with real power or respect. The council chamber was enormous. Hundreds of seats rose up in circles around a central floor where speakers stood. At the top sat the Xanthari leaders, the ancient race that ruled the empire. They looked like tall lizards wearing fancy robes with golden scales and cold yellow eyes. Supreme Chancellor Vextar was the most important Xanthari. He sat on a throne made of some kind of black metal, looking down at everyone else like they were insects. When Marcus and Sarah entered, Vextar's eyes fixed on them with obvious disgust. "The human delegation has arrived," announced a smaller alien with many eyes. "Ambassador Marcus Chen of Earth requesting full membership status for his species." Marcus walked to the center of the chamber. Sarah was supposed to sit in the visitor area, but she stayed close to her father. The huge room made her feel very small. "Honored Chancellor," Marcus began, reading from prepared notes. "Humanity has followed all imperial laws for 50 years. We have contributed resources, technology, and soldiers when asked. We believe we have earned the right to full membership." Vextar leaned forward on his throne. "Humans are still young and primitive. You have been useful as workers and fighters, yes, but membership requires wisdom and understanding of your place in the natural order." "What natural order?" Sarah asked suddenly. The entire chamber went quiet. Hundreds of alien eyes turned to look at the small human girl. Marcus felt his heart stop. "Sarah, please," he started. "No, let the child speak," Vextar said with amusement. "What do you mean, little human?" Sarah looked up at the towering alien leader without fear. "You keep talking about natural order, but I don't understand. Yesterday I met some Cathara people in the market. They're really nice and smart, but the guards said they're slaves. Why are smart, nice people slaves if there's a natural order?" Several aliens in the chamber shifted uncomfortably. The Cathara were an aquatic species known for their peaceful nature and advanced biotechnology. The Empire had enslaved them 300 years ago. Vextar's amusement vanished. "The Cathara are inferior. They exist to serve their betters. This is the way of the universe." "But that doesn't make sense," Sarah continued, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. "They built amazing underwater cities before you conquered them. They never hurt anyone. How can hurting innocent people be natural order?" Marcus tried to step forward, but 2 Xanthari guards blocked his path. Other species representatives were whispering among themselves. Some looked uncomfortable. Others nodded slightly at Sarah's words. "The child speaks wisdom," said a delegate from the Veltari system. "Perhaps we should reconsider." "Silence," Vextar roared, standing up from his throne. His scales turned a darker color and his clawed hands clenched into fists. "I will not be lectured by a primitive mammalian child about the order of the universe." Sarah stepped back, frightened by his anger, but she didn't look away. "I just think hurting people who never hurt you is wrong. My dad taught me that." "Your father taught you incorrectly," Vextar hissed. He reached to his belt and drew out a long, glowing weapon, a ceremonial plasma blade that hummed with deadly energy. "Perhaps a demonstration of proper order is needed." Marcus struggled against the guards holding him. "No, she's just a child. She doesn't understand." "She understands enough to question Imperial authority," Vextar said, raising the plasma blade above his head. "Let this be a lesson to all inferior species about the price of insolence." The blade came down in a brilliant flash of light. Sarah's scream cut off suddenly. She fell to the floor, her small body still and broken. Blood spread across the polished marble stones beneath her. "Sarah." Marcus broke free from the guards and dropped to his knees beside his daughter. He gathered her into his arms, but her eyes were already empty. No, no, no. Sarah, please. The council chamber was completely silent except for Marcus's sobbing. Aliens from dozens of species stared in shock at what they had just witnessed. Some covered their eyes or looked away. Others recorded everything with their communication devices. Vextar cleaned his blade calmly and put it back on his belt. The demonstration is complete. Let this be remembered by all who consider questioning imperial authority. The human delegation is dismissed. Earth's petition for membership is denied permanently. Marcus held his daughter's body and wept. Her blood soaked through his diplomatic uniform. The little girl who had asked simple questions about right and wrong lay dead in his arms. She was just asking why, Marcus whispered. She just wanted to understand. The transmission from the council chamber was being broadcast live to Earth. Every communication satellite picked up the signal. Every news station carried the feed. Every screen on the planet showed the moment when Supreme Chancellor Vextar murdered a 12-year-old girl for speaking about justice. In homes and offices across Earth, people watched in horror as Marcus Chen carried his daughter's body from the chamber. The Xanthari guards made no move to help or interfere. Other alien delegates quietly filed out, many looking ashamed. As the transmission ended, something changed in the hearts of 8 billion humans. The girl who had dreamed of meeting aliens and seeing the galaxy was dead, killed not in battle or by accident, but murdered in cold blood for asking why innocent people suffered. The last image Earth received was of the council chamber floor, where a pool of human blood slowly spread across stones that had never before been stained by such innocent loss. Above it, Vextar's throne sat empty. But his message was clear. This was what happened to those who questioned the Empire's power. Earth had learned a terrible lesson about the Galactic Empire. Soon the Empire would learn an even more terrible lesson about humanity. The news reached Earth faster than light itself. Within 3 hours of Sarah Chen's murder, every major city on the planet knew what had happened. The footage played on every screen in every language, showing the moment when a child's innocent question had cost her life. In New York, people gathered in Times Square and watched the massive displays in complete silence. In London, Parliament stopped all proceedings as members stared at their tablets in shock. In Tokyo, millions of workers left their offices early, unable to concentrate on anything except the image of a little girl dying for speaking truth. President Elena Vasquez stood in the Oval Office, watching the footage for the 10th time. Her hands shook as she saw Sarah fall. Behind her, military advisors and cabinet members waited for orders, but Elena couldn't speak. She was a mother herself, and the sight of Marcus Chen holding his dead daughter broke something inside her. "Madam President," said General Morrison, her military advisor, "we need to respond. The people are demanding action." Elena turned away from the screen. Outside the White House, crowds were growing larger by the hour. They weren't rioting or causing trouble. They were just standing there, holding pictures of Sarah Chen and signs that read, "Justice for Sarah and never again." "What can we do against an empire that spans thousands of worlds?" Elena asked quietly. "We fight," said a new voice from the doorway. Admiral Jackson Hayes walked into the room. He was 70 years old with gray hair and scars from the Martian Independence War. He had been retired for 5 years, living quietly on a farm in Montana. But when the call came, he put his uniform back on without hesitation. "Admiral Hayes," Elena said, "I wasn't sure you would come." "A child was murdered for asking why," Hayes said simply. "There's nowhere I'd rather be than here, planning to make them pay for it." Elena nodded and activated the emergency communication system. Within minutes, she was connected to every world leader on Earth. The faces on the screen showed the same anger and determination she felt. "My fellow leaders," Elena began, "we have all seen what the Galactic Empire thinks of our children. They believe we are primitive animals who should be grateful for their scraps. They are wrong." Prime Minister Chen of the Asian Federation spoke first. "Sarah Chen was named after my grandmother. Her father is my cousin. This is personal for all of us now. The European Union stands ready," added Chancellor Muller. "Our shipyards can be converted to military production within weeks." "Africa is with Earth," said President Okafor. "Our mineral resources are at your disposal." One by one, every nation pledged their support. The divisions that had split humanity for centuries disappeared in the face of a common enemy. Earth would speak with one voice, and that voice would demand justice. Admiral Hayes stepped forward. If we're going to do this, we need to do it right. The Empire thinks we're weak because we haven't conquered other species. They don't understand that we've been fighting each other for thousands of years. We know war better than they ever will. Dr. Anya Petrov arrived from the European Space Research Center 2 days later. She was humanity's leading weapons expert, the woman who had designed Earth's orbital defense platforms. When she saw the footage of Sarah's death, she immediately called the Pentagon and volunteered her services. What do we have that can hurt them? Admiral Hayes asked as they reviewed Earth's military capabilities. More than they expect, Dr. Petrov replied, spreading holographic displays across the table. They use energy weapons and shields. Very advanced, very elegant. But they've forgotten about the simple things. She pointed to a display showing Earth's nuclear arsenal. These aren't elegant, but they work. We also have kinetic weapons. Tungsten rods accelerated to incredible speeds. And then there's the antimatter research. Admiral Hayes studied the data. How long until we can field a real fleet? 6 months for basic ships. A year for the advanced designs. But Admiral, we need to think differently than they do. They fight for conquest and glory. We're fighting for justice and survival. That changes everything. Elena addressed the United Earth Assembly 3 days after Sarah's murder. The chamber was packed beyond capacity, with billions more watching on screens around the world. Sarah Chen asked a simple question, Elena said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. She asked why innocent people suffer under the Empire's rule. For this question, she was murdered in cold blood by Supreme Chancellor Vexitar himself. The audience erupted in angry shouts, but Elena raised her hand for silence. They think this will make us submit. They think fear will keep us quiet. They are wrong. Today, humanity declares that we will not bow to tyranny. We will not accept the murder of our children. We will have justice. Elena paused as the cheering died down. I am authorizing the largest military buildup in human history. Every shipyard, every factory, every resource on Earth will be dedicated to one goal, making the Galactic Empire pay for what they have done. The vote was unanimous. 8 billion humans committed to war. The Empire's response came exactly 1 week after Sarah's death. A single massive ship appeared at the edge of the solar system, a Zenthari dreadnought 3 kilometers long and bristling with weapons. War Commander Zeftos broadcast his message on all frequencies. Humans of Earth, your species has committed the crime of defying imperial authority. You will immediately surrender all military assets and submit to imperial justice. You have 24 hours to comply, or your world will be destroyed. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the orbital defense station Unity 1, watching the alien ship approach. Around him, human officers worked at their stations with calm determination. They knew they were about to make history. Status report. Hayes ordered. Kinetic systems charged and ready, reported Lieutenant Kim. Target locked and tracked. Energy. Readings suggest they're charging weapons, added Commander Park. Estimate 5 minutes until they're in firing range. Hayes opened a channel to the Zenthari ship. War Commander Zeftos, this is Admiral Hayes of Earth Defense Command. You have entered our space without permission after your government murdered an innocent child. Leave now or face the consequences. Zeftos laughed over the communication link. Your primitive weapons cannot harm a Zenthari dreadnought. Surrender or watch your cities burn. You killed a little girl who asked why you hurt innocent people, Hayes said quietly. Let me show you why that was a mistake. He cut the communication and turned to his weapons officer. Fire. The tungsten rod left the railgun at 10% the speed of light. It was only a meter long and 30 centimeters wide, but it carried the energy of a nuclear bomb. The Zenthari ship's shields were designed to stop energy weapons and explosive missiles. They were not designed to stop a solid metal rod moving at 30,000 kilometers per second. The dreadnought simply disintegrated. One moment it was a massive symbol of imperial power. The next it was expanding clouds of superheated metal and plasma. Hayes opened a communication channel to the entire Galactic Empire. This is Admiral Jackson Hayes of Earth. Your Supreme Chancellor murdered our child. Consider this the first payment on the debt you owe us. We're coming for the rest. Across Earth, people watched the destruction of the Zenthari ship and cheered. The war had begun and humanity had drawn first blood. 6 months after Sarah Chen's murder, the first Imperial fleet arrived at the edge of human space. 300 ships carrying 50 million Zenthari warriors, commanded by Fleet Admiral Kextar, brother of the Supreme Chancellor. They expected to find a primitive world cowering in fear. Instead, they found something that would haunt Imperial nightmares for generations. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter looked the same as always, millions of rocks floating in the darkness. What the Xanthari didn't know was that humans had been mining those asteroids for decades, hollowing them out and turning them into weapons. Admiral Hayes stood in the command center buried deep inside Ceres, the largest asteroid. Around him, holographic displays showed the approaching Imperial fleet. His officers worked quietly at their stations, their faces grim but determined. "They're moving in standard Imperial formation," reported Commander Sarah Park, named after the murdered girl. "Battleships in front, support vessels behind. Energy. Readings show they're charging weapons," added Lieutenant Kim. "They'll be in firing range in 30 minutes." Hayes nodded and opened a communication channel to every hidden base in the asteroid belt. "All stations, this is Admiral Hayes. Operation Sarah's Shield is now active. Show them what happens when you hurt our children." The Xanthari fleet moved forward confidently. Their ships were huge and beautiful, covered in gleaming armor and powered by technology thousands of years old. They had conquered hundreds of worlds with these vessels. Earth would be no different. Then the asteroids began to move. What looked like ordinary space rocks suddenly revealed themselves as massive weapons platforms. Hidden engines fired, sending chunks of metal and ice hurtling toward the Imperial fleet at incredible speeds. The Xanthari shields were designed to stop laser beams and plasma bolts, not solid rocks the size of buildings moving at 50 kilometers per second. The first wave of kinetic projectiles tore through the Imperial formation like bullets through paper. Ships that had survived 1,000 battles were crushed by simple momentum and mass. The beautiful formations became clouds of twisted metal and frozen atmosphere. But that was only the beginning. Dr. Anya Petrov watched from the bridge of the research station hidden inside the asteroid Vesta. For months, she had worked with teams of engineers to create weapons the Empire had never imagined. Now it was time to test them. "Activate the X-ray laser grid," she ordered. Nuclear bombs exploded in carefully controlled sequences throughout the asteroid belt. But these weren't ordinary explosions. They were nuclear-pumped X-ray lasers turning the energy of fusion bombs into focused beams of deadly radiation. The Imperial ship's armor, designed to deflect energy weapons, simply melted under the intense radiation. Fleet Admiral Kexitar watched his magnificent fleet die around him. In 20 minutes, he had lost half his ships to weapons he didn't understand. These humans fought like savages, using brute force instead of elegant technology. "All ships fall back to Formation 7, he ordered. "Charge the plasma cannons. We'll burn these asteroids to dust." But the humans weren't finished. Hidden throughout the belt were Dr. Petrov's most terrible creations, antimatter missiles. Each one carried only a few grams of antimatter, but when it touched normal matter, it released energy equal to 100 nuclear bombs. The missiles were invisible to Imperial sensors, too small and fast to track. The Imperial flagship, Pride of Xanthar, was a kilometer-long dreadnought that had never been seriously damaged in 3 centuries of war. It died in a flash of pure energy when an antimatter missile the size of a baseball struck its hull. The explosion was visible from Earth. Kexitar's command ship was smaller but better armored. It survived the antimatter barrage, but barely. Half his crew was dead and the ship's systems were failing. "Signal retreat," he screamed. "All ships emergency jump to hyperspace." Of the 300 ships that had entered the Sol system, only 47 escaped. The asteroid belt was filled with the wreckage of Imperial vessels and the frozen bodies of Xanthari warriors who had thought humans were easy prey. Admiral Hayes opened a communication channel that reached across the galaxy. "This is Admiral Hayes of Earth Defense Command. You sent 300 ships to destroy us. We sent back 47, so you can tell your Supreme Chancellor what happened here. Every human ship, every human weapon, every human soldier is dedicated to one mission: making you pay for murdering Sarah Chen." The news of the battle reached the Imperial capital within hours. Supreme Chancellor Vextar raged in his palace, smashing ancient artifacts and threatening to execute his own advisors. How could primitive humans destroy a grand fleet? "Sir," said his military advisor, trembling with fear, "perhaps we underestimated them. Their weapons are crude but effective." "Impossible," Vextar hissed. "They are barely evolved mammals. Send the second fleet. But other Imperial leaders were not so confident. General Rathkor, veteran of a dozen conquest campaigns, studied the battle reports with growing unease. "Look at this," he told his staff, pointing to tactical displays. "They didn't just fight us, they learned from fighting us. These weapon systems were specifically designed to counter our standard tactics." "What do you mean?" asked his aide. "I mean, they've been planning this war for months, maybe years. While we thought they were cowering in fear, they were building an arsenal designed to kill Zenthari. Meanwhile, on Earth, the real war production was just beginning. Every factory on the planet had been converted to military use. Orbital shipyards worked around the clock, building vessels unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The new human ships weren't beautiful like Imperial vessels. They were ugly, practical machines designed for one purpose: destroying enemies as efficiently as possible. They carried nuclear missiles, kinetic weapons, and Dr. Petrov's latest creation, planet-killer asteroids equipped with faster-than-light drives. Admiral Hayes briefed President Vasquez on the new capabilities. "We can't match their numbers, but we don't have to. Our weapons are designed to kill ships, not capture them. Every shot is meant to destroy, not disable." "What about their occupied worlds?" Elena asked. "Millions of innocent aliens live under Imperial rule. We'll liberate them," Hayes replied. "But first we need to break the Empire's military power. And to do that, we're going to take the war to them." Dr. Petrov activated her most ambitious project, the Scorched Earth Protocol. Human ships would travel to uninhabited star systems and convert entire worlds into weapons. Planets would be hollowed out and turned into massive gun platforms. Moons would become ammunition for system-sized railguns. "We're not just fighting a war," she explained to her team. "We're industrializing warfare on a scale they can't imagine. Every star system we control becomes a factory for making more weapons." The Empire tried to respond with conventional tactics: more ships, bigger guns, stronger shields. They didn't understand that humans had fundamentally changed the rules of warfare. When the Second Imperial Fleet arrived at Earth's outer colonies, they found the planets empty but not abandoned. The human colonists had evacuated, but they had left behind a gift. Every major city was now a nuclear bomb. The Imperial forces landed to find buildings that exploded when touched, roads that were actually concealed minefields, and water supplies that had been poisoned with radioactive material. "The humans had turned their own worlds into traps. This is madness," said Fleet Admiral Rextor as his troops died by the thousands. "No civilized species would do this to their own worlds." He was right. No civilized species would, but humans weren't fighting to be civilized. They were fighting to avenge a murdered child, and they would use any weapon, pay any price, and break any rule to win. The war was just beginning, and the Empire was starting to learn what it meant to face an enemy that fought with nothing left to lose. 2 years had passed since Sarah Chen's death, and the galaxy was burning. Human fleets pushed deeper into Imperial space, leaving a trail of destroyed worlds and liberated species behind them. The Galactic Empire, which had ruled for 10,000 years, was collapsing faster than anyone thought possible. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the UES Sarah's Vengeance, humanity's newest and most powerful warship. Unlike the elegant curves of Imperial vessels, her ship looked like what it was: a weapon built by people who understood that war was about killing enemies, not looking pretty while doing it. "Captain," called Lieutenant Torres from the sensor station, "we're approaching the Cathara system. 3 Imperial battleships guarding the slave camps." Maria nodded grimly. The Cathara were the aquatic species that Sarah had asked about, the peaceful people whose enslavement had led to the question that cost a little girl her life. Now humanity was coming to set them free. "Signal the fleet," Maria ordered. "All ships prepare for combat. Remember, we're not here to capture ships. We're here to free slaves." The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace like an avalanche of metal and fury. 50 ships, each one loaded with enough firepower to crack a moon. The Imperial vessels tried to respond, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. The battle lasted 30 minutes. When it was over, the 3 Imperial battleships were expanding clouds of plasma and debris. Not a single human ship had been lost. Maria opened a communication channel to the planet below. "This is Captain Santos of the Earth Defense Forces. We are here to liberate all Cathara people. Prepare for immediate evacuation of all slave facilities." The response came in the form of singing. The Cathara communicated through complex musical patterns, and their joy at being freed created a harmony that brought tears to the eyes of hardened human soldiers. They had been slaves for 300 years and now they were free, but the Kythera offered more than just gratitude. Their leader, a being named Deep Singer Coral Dreams, met with Maria in the planet's vast underwater cities. "Your people died for ours," Coral Dreams sang in her liquid voice. "A child spoke truth and paid with life. We will not forget. We offer our biotechnology to your cause." The alliance between humans and Kythera created something the Empire had never faced before: living warships. The Kythera could grow vessels from modified coral and sea creatures, creating ships that could heal themselves, adapt to enemy weapons, and reproduce. Combined with human weapons technology, these bioships became unstoppable. Admiral Hayes watched from his command ship as the new hybrid fleet assembled. Ships that looked like massive sea creatures floated next to angular human vessels, all working together with one purpose: destroying the Empire that had murdered an innocent child. "Status report, Hayes ordered. 80% of the outer colonies have been liberated," reported Commander Park. "The Veltari have joined our alliance, along with the Kythera and 12 other species. Imperial forces are falling back to their core worlds. What about casualties?" "Minimal on our side. The bioships take most of the damage and heal themselves. Enemy casualties are extensive." Hayes nodded. "The Empire was learning what happened when you fought an enemy that didn't care about taking prisoners or looking honorable. Human forces killed Imperial soldiers with the same cold efficiency they would use to exterminate disease. On Nexus Prime, the Imperial capital, Supreme Chancellor Vexitar paced in his throne room like a caged animal. His advisors brought him reports of defeat after defeat, each one more devastating than the last. "How is this possible?" he screamed. "They are primitives, barely out of the trees." General Rathkor, one of the few military leaders still alive, spoke carefully. "Sir, they are not fighting like primitives. They are fighting like a species that has nothing left to lose." "Explain." "Every human ship carries images of the child you killed. Every soldier wears her name on their armor. They are not fighting for conquest or glory. They are fighting for revenge. And sir, they are very good at it." Vextar's scales darkened with rage. "Then we will destroy their homeworld. Gather every ship we have left. We will burn Earth to ash!" But even as he spoke, human forces were closing in on Nexus Prime itself. Captain Santos led the assault fleet, her bioship alliance cutting through Imperial defenses like a hot knife through ice. The siege of Nexus Prime lasted 3 days. The space around the planet became a graveyard of Imperial vessels as wave after wave of defenders died trying to stop the human advance. The planet's massive defense platforms, built over thousands of years, fell one by one to weapons they had never been designed to face. Maria stood in the transport ship as it descended toward the Imperial Palace. Around her, human Marines checked their weapons and armor. Each one wore a patch showing Sarah Chen's smiling face and the words, "Justice for Sarah." "Remember," Maria told her troops, "we're not here to conquer. We're here to end this. Every Imperial leader who supported the murder of a child will face trial, starting with the one who did the killing." The Imperial Palace was a massive structure that had stood for 10,000 years. Its walls had never been breached by enemy forces. That record ended when human Marines blasted through the gates with shaped nuclear charges. The fighting inside was brief, but vicious. Imperial guards tried to defend their leaders, but they were facing soldiers who had spent 2 years learning to kill efficiently. The humans moved through the palace like a force of nature, unstoppable and merciless. Supreme Chancellor Vexitar waited in his throne room, holding the same plasma blade he had used to kill Sarah Chen. Around him, his remaining guards stood ready to die for their leader. The massive doors exploded inward, and Captain Santos walked through the smoke with her weapon raised. Her armor was scorched from battle and her face was grim with purpose. "Vextar," she said simply, "you are under arrest for the murder of Sarah Chen and crimes against sentient beings." The Supreme Chancellor laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the empty throne room. "You think you have won? The Empire spans thousands of worlds. We will rebuild. We will return." "No," Maria replied. "You won't." She gestured to the holographic display behind her, which showed the galaxy-wide situation. Red dots marked former Imperial worlds that were now free. Blue dots showed human and allied forces. There were very few red dots left. Your empire is dead, Maria continued. Your fleets are destroyed. Your allies have abandoned you. And it all started because you murdered a little girl who asked why you hurt innocent people. Vextar raised his plasma blade with a snarl of rage. I will not be captured by primitive animals. Maria's plasma rifle fired once. The Supreme Chancellor fell beside his throne, the weapon that had killed Sarah Chen clattering across the floor. That was for Sarah, Maria said quietly. Outside the palace, the liberation of Nexus Prime continued. Imperial officials surrendered by the thousands, while freed slaves of dozens of species celebrated in the streets. The symbol of imperial power for 10,000 years had fallen in less than a week. Admiral Hayes received the news while planning the final phase of the war. There were still scattered imperial forces throughout the galaxy, but without their capital and leadership, they were just pirates and remnants. Sir, reported Commander Park, Captain Santos confirms the palace is secure. Vextar is dead. The imperial government has officially surrendered. Hayes nodded and opened a communication channel to Earth. Madam President, this is Admiral Hayes. The war is over. Justice has been served. On Earth, President Vasquez addressed the world from the same chamber where she had declared war 2 years earlier. Today, the murder of Sarah Chen has been avenged. The Galactic Empire has fallen. Freedom has triumphed over tyranny. But even as she spoke, Maria Santos stood in the Imperial throne room, looking at the blood on the floor where Vexistar had died. It was almost the same spot where Sarah Chen had been murdered 2 years ago. I hope you can rest now, little one, she whispered. The monster who killed you is dead and his empire is broken. No other child will die for asking why. The war was over, but the work of building something better was just beginning. 3 years had passed since the death of Sarah Chen, and the galaxy was reborn. Where once the Galactic Empire had ruled through fear and oppression, now the Galactic Federation governed through cooperation and justice. The change had come at a terrible price, but from the ashes of war, something beautiful was growing. Admiral Jackson Hayes stood in what had once been the Imperial Council chamber on Nexus Prime, now renamed New Harmony. The room had been completely rebuilt. Where marble floors had once been stained with a child's blood, a memorial garden now grew. Trees from dozens of worlds reached toward the transparent ceiling, and flowers of every color bloomed around a small fountain. In the center of the garden stood a simple statue of a 12-year-old girl, with curious eyes and a gentle smile. The plaque beneath it bore Sarah Chen's words in every known language of the galaxy. Why do you hurt them when they've done nothing wrong? Today was the most important day in galactic history. Representatives from over 300 species had gathered to sign the Galactic Charter of Rights, a document that would ensure no child would ever again die for speaking truth to power. President Elena Vasquez, now serving as Earth's first ambassador to the Federation, walked through the garden with deep singer choral dreams of the Cathara. The aquatic being moved in a special environment suit that allowed her to participate in air-breathing society. Your Sarah child changed everything, Choral Dreams sang in her musical voice. Before her death, we accepted slavery as natural. Now we understand that freedom is the birthright of all thinking beings. Elena nodded, touching one of the memorial flowers. She asked such simple questions. Why do people hurt others? Why don't we help those who suffer? She couldn't understand cruelty because she had never learned to accept it. Dr. Anya Petrov joined them, her hair now gray from 3 years of intensive research and development. During the war, she had created weapons of unimaginable destruction. Now she worked on tools of creation, terraforming technology, medical advances, and clean energy systems. The vote is ready to begin, she told Elena. Every species representative is here except the Zenthari. The surviving Zenthari were a broken people. Their empire was gone, their worlds were occupied, and their leaders were dead or in prison. Most of the remaining Zenthari lived as refugees on remote worlds, struggling to adapt to a galaxy where they were no longer masters. Elena looked sad. I wish they could be here. The Federation is supposed to be for everyone, even former enemies. Perhaps one day, Choral Dreams sang, when they learn that justice is better than power. The ceremony began with a moment of silence for all who had died in the war. Holographic displays showed images of the fallen, not just human soldiers, but beings from dozens of species who had fought for freedom. Sarah Chen's image appeared first, and it remained visible throughout the entire ceremony. Captain Maria Santos, now promoted to Admiral and serving as head of Federation security, read the opening words of the charter. We, the free beings of the galaxy, establish this federation on the principle that all sentient life has value. No being shall be enslaved, oppressed, or murdered for speaking truth. No child shall fear asking questions. No world shall bow to tyranny. The applause was thunderous. Representatives from species that had been enemies for thousands of years stood and cheered together. The Veltari delegation, whose people had been slaves for centuries, wept openly as their leader signed the document. One by one, each species added their signature to the charter. When it was Earth's turn, Elena signed with a pen made from metal recovered from the wreckage of the first Imperial ship destroyed in the war. The final signature belonged to the newest member of the Federation, a young representative of the Xanthari refugees. Commander Zexrel was barely an adult by Xanthari standards, and she had spent the war years learning about justice and equality from human teachers. The Xanthari people apologize for the crimes of our leaders, she said in carefully practiced English. We wish to learn the ways of peace and justice. We pledge to honor the memory of Sarah Chen by protecting all children of all species. The chamber erupted in applause again. Even former enemies could find redemption in the new galaxy. President Vasquez stepped to the podium for the closing address. Behind her, Sarah's statue seemed to watch over the gathering with those same curious eyes that had asked uncomfortable questions 3 years ago. We didn't start this war seeking conquest or glory, Elena began. We fought it because a little girl who believed in justice was murdered for her innocence. Today that innocence has transformed a galaxy. She paused, looking out at the sea of different faces, beings with tentacles, fur scales and features that defied description, all united by a common cause. Sarah Chen asked why we hurt those who have done nothing wrong. Today we answer her question by promising that we never will again. Every child among the stars can now speak truth to power and know they will be protected. The formal ceremony ended, but the celebration continued in the memorial garden. Children from dozens of species played together among the flowers, their laughter echoing through halls that had once known only the silence of oppression. A young Kithara child, moving in a small water-filled mobility suit, approached Sarah's statue with a flower crown made of kelp and starfish. An alien child with 4 arms and purple skin helped her place it on the statue's head. A human boy from the Mars colony sang a song about friendship, while a Veltari child with wings fluttered above, adding harmony to the melody. Admiral Hayes watched from a balcony above, feeling his old heart swell with emotion. Beside him stood Marcus Chen, Sarah's father, who had spent the last 3 years working with war orphans across the galaxy. She would have loved this, Marcus said quietly, watching the children play. All these different kids being friends, asking questions together. She made it possible, Hayes replied. One child's courage changed everything. Not courage, Marcus corrected. Innocence. She didn't know she was being brave. She just couldn't understand why people were mean to each other. Down in the garden, the children had discovered something wonderful. The memorial fountain was programmed to respond to laughter. The more joy it detected, the higher the water danced. Soon, kids from across the galaxy were giggling and shrieking as rainbow-colored streams shot 30 feet into the air. Dr. Petrov watched from her position by the research displays, where she was showing other scientists plans for new worlds to be terraformed specifically for refugee populations. The war had displaced billions of beings, but now they would have new homes, new chances for peace. The children understand what adults took 3 years of war to learn, she observed to her colleague. It doesn't matter what you look like or where you come from. What matters is being kind. As evening fell on New Harmony, the ceremony moved to its final phase. Sarah's memorial garden was open to the public permanently, and a new tradition was established. Every year on this date, children from across the galaxy would gather here to ask questions about justice, equality, and peace. The first annual question day began immediately. A small Xanthari child, one of the refugees being raised by human families, stood before Sarah's statue and asked, "Why did the grown-ups fight when they could have been friends instead?" An older human girl, daughter of a Federation diplomat, answered, "Because sometimes grown-ups forget how to ask good questions like you just did." Elena Vasquez stood with Admiral Hayes as the last ships departed New Harmony, carrying representatives back to their home worlds. Each ship carried copies of the charter and plans for implementing its principles across the galaxy. "What do you think she would say if she could see this?" Elena asked, nodding toward the garden where a few children were still playing despite the late hour. Hayes smiled. "Probably something like, 'Why did it take so long for everyone to figure out that being nice is better than being mean?'" They laughed, but there was truth in it. Sarah Chen had asked simple questions that exposed complex injustices. Her innocence had become the foundation for a new kind of civilization. Far away in the depths of space, the last Zenthari battle fleet received news of the Federation's formation. Fleet Admiral Krektar, one of the few surviving Imperial commanders, read the offer of amnesty with growing amazement. "They're offering us citizenship," he told his officers. "Full membership in their federation if we accept the charter and renounce conquest." "It's a trap," said his second-in-command. "No," Krektar replied, thinking of the human forces he had fought. "These beings don't make traps. They make offers. The question is, are we wise enough to accept?" And in the memorial garden on New Harmony, Sarah Chen's statue watched over playing children as water danced in the fountain and flowers bloomed under alien stars. The little girl who had died for asking why now lived on in a galaxy where every child could ask questions without fear. The war was over. Justice had been served, and a better future had begun with the simple curiosity of a 12-year-old who couldn't understand why people hurt each other. Her questions would echo through eternity, ensuring that no other child would ever again pay the ultimate price for speaking truth to power.